our job then at the beginning of the book is to clearly state that problem in a way that the reader will recognize themselves. So
Absolutely.
think about it kind of like the ordinary world. Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Son,
And I'm Eric Mertz.
and it's episode 115 of the podcast, and it is May 24th, 2023, as we record this. Today, we're talking about nonfiction and how to write a clearly defined problem and solution in your nonfiction project, whether it's a book or an article or a blog post or whatever. We don't have any new patrons this week. Thank you so much to our existing patrons. We really appreciate your patronage. We, speaking of patrons, Patreon. So I had a writer recently talk to me about my coaching and how they thought it would be really useful and wanted to do it, but just didn't have the funds right now. So what I
Right.
did actually was I went into Patreon just yesterday, and one of the tiers, it's the Mary Poppins fan tier.
Oh.
Practically perfect in every way. It's regularly $15 a month, and I made a free trial for it. It's a 7-day free trial. So if you go in to the Mary Poppins, so if you go to patreon.com/Valerie Isan and look under the tiers, I've got a bunch of tiers, probably way too many. But it's not the very first thing you see. You have to click on the see more tiers, and then it's the Mary Poppins fan. It's regularly $15 a month, and you would get the shout out on the podcast, the postcard, all my ebooks, your name in the acknowledgments of my books as I write them, and signed paperbacks mailed to you as I publish them. And then
Wow.
it comes with a weekly email check-in. Just I'll email you and check in with you and see what's up and if you need help with anything. And it also includes a 15-minute weekly Zoom call that we can use it for. You got a quick question, or I can help you come up with a solution for something, or we can just accountability wise, keep track of like celebrate your wins, and you tell me what you want to do that week. And so it's only a week long trial, but in that week you could get in and do the Zoom call, and I'll email you and stuff like that. And you could also like get the paperbacks and everything that you wanted to.
That
So
sounds
so
like
it's
a
a
bargain.
free trial, I guess. And if you work fast and within that 7 days, you can get that little tiny mini coaching session. And so you can give it a shot. And if you like it, then you can end up with like those quick little 15-minute coaching sessions every week for $15 a month.
That's a pretty good deal.
So
I,
so
I've
yeah.
noticed that that Patreon is now starting trial memberships. That's gonna be
Yeah,
they
that's
just
what I
announced
just
that.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, yesterday. I was like, that's great. I'm gonna
Yeah, as soon as I
doing
saw that,
that.
I remembered the woman that wanted to do the coaching and didn't have the funds right now. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just pick one of the tiers that's like kind of coaching and see,
Right, right.
if it works. Yeah. So you can go to patreon.com/Valerie Isan for a free trial of the Mary Poppins fan
The
tier.
Mary Poppins tier. I love it.
Yeah.
It brings a smile to my morning face.
So does my coffee. I'm going to take a sip.
Yay to coffee.
Mm,
That was good radio right there. We both took a sip of a drink and there was dead air for a moment. That's just what they teach you in radio
just what
broadcasting.
they teach you. Yeah.
Dead air is wonderful.
No, I thought
No,
dead air was bad.
dead air is bad, really bad. It's
All
fine.
right.
People love us anyway.
Author update. Author update.
You want me to go first?
Well, I just did a bunch of, admin stuff, really.
Hmm.
I've been working on in ConvertKit. I have ConvertKit, and so they have this creator profile, and they've got this creator network that's in their in a beta testing phase right now. I should make a note to put a link in the show notes, but so if you want to check it out. But it sounded kind of cool. It's a way so you can recommend other creators
Hmm.
in the ConvertKit world, whoever's using them, and on this creator network. And so so it's kind of like mailing list, subscribe, um, promotion, sort of,
Hmm.
so if I've got a profile up there now, so if anybody else is also a writer or also a coach or editor or whatever, they could link me as a recommended creator. And so whenever somebody signs up for a mailing list, it pops up these recommended creators that
Oh,
a person could go and look at. So, it helps drive traffic to your mailing list, I guess, to see if, to
cool.
try to increase subscribers. So I was kind of building that up yesterday. And again, thinking about stuff, learning. There is I'm thinking about doing like a 5-day challenge to try to get more mailing list subscribers. But
Hmm.
I don't know for sure what to do the challenge on. So I think I'm going to think of like 2 or 3 things it could be and poll my mailing list and see which
Hmm.
one, resonates most and then create a challenge. I've never done a challenge before, but I like them. I like taking them from other creators and other business people.
I've
So
never done a challenge either. I'm not a challenged type.
I really dig
Challenging
challenges,
type.
because I like goals. I like crossing things off. I like, you know, being challenged. I just did that 100-day dress challenge,
I
remember?
saw you did, yes.
100 days
I
in
saw
one
about
dress.
34 of those days on social media. Looked like
And
fun.
I just went 30 days without drinking alcohol.
Oh, cool.
So, I just like setting little challenges for myself because it helps me stay accountable. It helps, build healthy habits and
And that's important. I think like
yeah.
anything that gets you to healthy habits, like whatever they are, whatever your
Hmm.
path, that's the right thing.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
So that's what I've been doing mostly. I finished up a editing client work.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
You don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is. Well, that editing client took one of those stories that you
Uh-huh.
edited and published it on Patreon. So I have a new story out.
Plug the
Long
website.
time listener, and so yeah, I've actually started another.
Patreon.com/strange air stories.
Thank you for saving me there with that. I am so bad at plugging. Um, yeah, so I have a new story out. I've actually started working on. I had in my notebook, my trusty little notebook that everybody buys me. Like everybody buys, those little black and white, like little composition notebooks from
Uh-huh.
school. Yeah, like my wife sees them and she's like, "Look what I got." There's like, 20 of them. I have boxes of them. But I love this. I love that people know that these are
Uh-huh.
like comfort for me. Like I could just if I just like surrounded myself in them, I would never feel anxiety because they're that. So
Do you know
anyway, I fill those.
I have one of those comp books. It's a leather cover for them. So it's gorgeous, that when you feel like, oh, I've got this beautiful, piece of it feels good to hold and, I just
No,
like it, but it's just comp books, so because sometimes when you get a really pretty journal, you're like, oh, do I want to really write in it? What if I use it up for something dumb? And
I I have this like they end up getting stickered and they get like
Mhm.
doodled and whatever. And so I can pull them off the shelf and sometimes recall, oh, I know what's in here because this is the one that has the,
Mm,
this sticker on it. But I started writing like 3 of those stories in the last week just because I need to start churning those out. So yeah, author update. I've been creating a, a bunch of new short stories. I just finished the draft of the next novel. I'm deciding how I want to go about rewriting it at this point, getting the cover, kind of doing. I'm in that little in between phase. I gave myself until this weekend to decide how I was going to proceed. So we'll see. But I'm using the time to write some new stories, some new Patreon stories,
awesome.
which will be, I think there's one of them that's really good. I say that every time. Like this one's going to be really good. And so that I like that feeling of like optimism that like
Uh-huh.
the beginning of the story is as fun. And then sometimes the ending is like when you get done with it, it's just as fun. Like when I released that longtime listener story, I was like, I liked writing this. I liked the idea. Think it was the best execution of that idea. Yeah,
Cool. Writing short
What are you?
stories. I'm writing down these notes in the show notes for your author update. Writing short stories.
Oh, what are you
What am I
reading?
reading? Right now I'm reading a nonfiction title, co-writing with ChatGPT. Got to
Oh,
stay up
okay.
with all of the stuff. And for fiction, I'm still reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is really good. I'm really liking it.
Hmm.
A lot of books keep jumping the stack, so I'm reading it slower than I normally do, but I am enjoying it a lot.
Right.
And I just finished reading the Grady Hendrix book, The Final Girl Support Group. That was really
Oh, yeah.
fun too. That was a
I'm
fun
sure.
read. And I finished reading Escape to Costa Rica Manual.
Mm.
The Costa Rica, I said that backwards. The Costa Rica Escape Manual. Yeah. So it's just a family that had moved to Costa Rica and was just writing about her experience. So
Cool.
those are the books I've read in the last few days.
Well, I am reading. Um, I'm reading Just Kids, the Patti Smith's memoir
Oh
about her
yeah.
sort of early life with Robert Mapplethorpe, which is it's just fascinating. It's such an interesting. I mean, I love her as an artist. I've always loved her. Like one of my first records was a Patti Smith record, and so I hold her in a really high regard. But just to read about that life, like life isn't like that anymore. These kids are just, it's New York City in the late 60s and early 70s, and they're living in these cheap apartments, and they're, dumpster diving for art supplies, and they're living on grilled cheese sandwiches and coffee. It's something so sweet about it. And she's just her memory, as far as just writing memoir goes, like it is the details in things that she recalls. Either she kept a really, really like consistent journal, or she just has this a beautifully like photographic memory, because there's just
Mm.
some. I just read some chapter where she was talking about um like just a specific afternoon, and the sequence of events, and like how the subway tokens played in, and how that led to them not having enough to each get a sandwich, but then how sharing the sandwich brought them back together. And it was like, wow, that detail, it just made me feel like I was there. So,
That's
and I
cool.
have, my family's from New York, and I anything about sort of that era in New York City always appeals to me, because
Mm-hmm.
that's a gritty New York City where people could live cheaply is gone, way
Mm.
gone. So it's just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool. And now they're in the Chelsea Hotel, which has all that artsy mythology to it, so it's kind of, it's a great book. I mean, even if you don't know who Patti Smith or Robert Mapplethorpe are, it's just an interesting look at a different life, a
Cool.
really different life. Yeah.
Speaking of different life, I don't know if I mentioned this last week or not, but Ali and I just finished watching on Netflix a Japanese show called Sanctuary about the sumo wrestling world.
Oh, you
It
know
was
what? I may.
super interesting. I recommend it just for, wanting to dive into another world that you know nothing about, and getting a glimpse of.
Mm.
It was super interesting.
Funny, I'll tell a
Well
funny
done.
little. This isn't going in my memoir, but I remember this clearly. We used to get Japanese exchange students, and I had this Japanese exchange student for a summer, and he was. I'm 6 foot and 200 pounds. I've always been big. This
Mhm,
kid was probably 5'2" and like 110 pounds, little guy.
mhm.
And so he was showing me how sumo wrestling worked, and so I just remember thinking like, I'm gonna knock this little guy on his block. And I don't know, it's all angles, it must be all, because he came in and I was out of the ring so fast, like, and I was almost twice his size. Like, so every time I think of sumo wrestling, I think of Tamahiro, who knocked me on my back, and he was half my size. So it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog, right?
Oh,
Heard
yeah.
that one?
I have not heard
Yeah.
that one, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Let's talk
Shall
about
we get
nonfiction.
nonfiction? So we both write nonfiction.
Yep,
Um,
we do.
you as a ghostwriter must write
Yep.
quite a bit, actually. Is it
a
kind of
lot.
half and half, or is it mostly fiction and screenplays at this point?
The fiction, the majority of fiction that I write is in screenplay form. That's
Mm-hmm.
still is the niche that I fill.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I write a lot of nonfiction, and it's usually in the form of a memoir, or a business book, a how-to.
Mm-hmm.
I write a lot of how-to articles for people. So yeah, knowing,
Plus your own blog too. You have a
yep,
weekly blog, a writing blog,
yep,
writer for writers. Sorry,
yep,
I said that
yep,
weird, but you know what I mean.
yes,
So you're writing articles, blog post articles every week too.
every week, yep,
Yeah. And yeah, and I also write memoir, which is nonfiction, but for the purposes of today, I guess I meant nonfiction being not narrative,
right, right,
so not the memoir, but more like the how-tos or the articles about something, or featured articles, or yeah, that's what I was thinking of when I was thinking of nonfiction, because um nonfiction, when you look at it that way, I see as just solving problems.
yep.
So we're
That's the way I think of
writing,
it.
yeah. So as a consumer, when I purchase a book, a nonfiction book, it's because I want the answer to something. I have a problem I need to solve, whether it's I need motivation to work out more or to eat better, or I need to understand how to use a product, or something like that. So
Right.
how to's, or how to books, or self-help books, like those are all um, well, prescriptive, I guess, in nature.
Yeah, I believe so. I think so.
and
They have to be.
and the purpose of them is to solve a problem for the reader.
Right. Right. The writer presumes that they have the answer to the question. Well, the first presumption is that, and I'm not using presumption in a negative sense. I know it gets thrown around, presumptive, but like we presume that we know that there's people that are asking a question. When I write a blog, I I have tools, but I presume that the potential reader's question is, how do I do this thing? And so I write a blog that answers that question. Like, how do I think I have a blog on my site, how to write how to write a scene where someone's eavesdropping, right? Like how to do that. And because I had found that was a really hard thing for certain writers to write. So yeah, I presume that there's people who have that question, and I went and answered it. I don't know if I really answered it, but I mean, you can go, if you want to go to my site and look at how to write an eavesdropping scene and tell me whether or not I answered it, it's out there. So
What's the title? How to
I think
write
it's just how to write an eavesdropping scene, for
eavesdropping
comic purposes, for mystery
scene.
purposes. Yeah, it just like covers the different genres and how eavesdropping can work, and what its purpose is in sort of in dramatic storytelling. So yeah, like I think that the nonfiction that people latch onto is not just, it's not necessarily does it answer the question, but does it, like your question, but does it in a compelling way address the issues around that question? I think if you look at nonfiction that just you lose your interest in, it's where that writer meanders a little bit from that central question. If it is how to use ChatGPT in your business and it drifts into other topics, the reader loses interest, right? Because and I think that's where
Or gets
nonfiction
annoyed.
gets annoyed, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where nonfiction is appealing to everyone, right? I know a lot of people say like they don't read fiction. And I think because this is such the value proposition in nonfiction is so clear, right? I have a pain point, I have a question, I want to learn something. This is where I'm going to get that thing from. It's a simple like need, uh, a need question with an answer. I think that's part of the appeal of it.
And also, this is sort of like a little side note, but as writers of nonfiction, you can charge more for your book than fiction in terms
Yes.
of page count, like, so even if it's a small book that would, if it were fiction, be like a novelette, or maybe a novella, but even shorter, like some people will spend $10 on a 10,000 word ebook
Yes.
because they want the answer to that question. So I guess I want to talk a little bit about
Well, before you go there, I also will say that in a business sense, the value of that answering that question is more than just the cost of the book. Like I work on books for clients who, like I'm working on a book now for a client who says, like, this book is going to be my ticket to the speaking circuit on this specific topic. So they're
mhm,
going to write the book, they're going to publish the book, and then they're going to use that as a tool. Now they're not going to, they might print 1,000 copies of that book and never make a dime directly from the book, but they make money from the clients who pick the book up for free and say, wow, I want to work with you because you just answered a really big question for me.
yeah.
So
They call that book
that's
as business card.
book as business. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And it's huge. It is
Yeah.
a huge market. It's really big. And it's not just a market for writers looking for writing assignments, but also if you are providing any kind of business service, I feel like you almost need to have a giveaway book. It's like I just feel like if you don't have something like that people can look at for you, I mean,
You've got that as a reader magnet on your site too, or you did at one point the how to hire a ghostwriter.
right. I wrote that because I would get into interviews with people. They'd come to my site, they'd find my contact information, they would contact me, and then I would have my interviews were getting too long because like
Mm,
people didn't. I had to sort of. I would always say, "What are your questions?" And they would say, "Well, I don't really know what you do or what So I wrote this book that just said, here's how you interview me. And
uh-huh.
now people download it, and at least half the interviews I have, people say, oh, I read your book, so I'm just going to ask these 5 questions. So
Mhm.
it's not only streamlined my process, but I have had multiple people read that book and just say, hey, I want you to write me a book like that. It's
That's
I mean,
awesome.
I've made more money from that book than I'll ever have made from any other, probably that I could make from any other book, short of getting a big contract from
Mhm.
a big 5 publisher. It's it's an effective way to spread your message, and that's what, if you're in business, that's how you get clients, is you have messaging and they are attracted to it. So
Great. That's awesome. And that kind of segues, I think, into so at the beginning, so you yourself had a problem
right,
and you solved it by writing this book so that your process could be more streamlined. And
right,
it solved the problem. Everybody was coming to you saying, like, I don't know what ghostwriters really do. So
right,
then, the book told you. The the problem at the beginning of the book is the problem of the reader. The
right,
reader has a problem or a pain point. You use that
right.
phrase. I like that too. So our job then at the beginning of the book is to clearly state that problem in a way that the reader will recognize themselves. So
Absolutely.
think about it kind of like the ordinary world.
Right.
So um,
Yeah. Good
I
good
think that
point.
the books that capture me the most, the nonfiction work that and we're not really talking about the hook yet, but like
Right.
the books that I enjoy reading and don't put down are the ones that spend a little bit more time with me in that ordinary world, in my problem at the beginning. What I mean by that is, well, sometimes I know exactly what my problem is. I know what I need to learn, and I know this book is going to tell me. So the introduction, and sometimes that gets a little bit bogged down for me. Like, okay, yes, I know all this. I'm totally with you. You're preaching to the choir. Get to the spot where you tell me what to do. But
Right.
that's not often what I need. And so knowing your market, I think, is knowing your audience is really important, because sometimes, yeah, cut to the chase, just give me the information, and you will have readers like that. But other times you're trying to present your readers world to them, so that they
Absolutely.
totally understand and trust that what they're going through and will follow you through this book.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more because I don't think anybody wants that the solution to that problem. I think you have to I think people read a lot more. Like maybe people don't read as many books as they used to, but people are picking up information all over the place. And so I think that people are used to being marketed to. And so I think if you're going to use like a long form writing exercise, like your advantage is that you can immerse the reader in their sort of their experience, their world, their pain, and get them to that point of, I like the word pain point. I like the term pain point. It sometimes feels a little manipulative, but it's, like I think it's just the advantage to writing is that you can immerse someone in that experience, and it gets them where it gets them where they need to go, and more than where you need them to be. It gets them where they need to go, and that's a point of trust that you just can't replicate in like a splash, like a visual ad. You can't replicate trust in that. So, yeah. I really find that's the best way. Even in a blog article that's 1,000, 1,500 words, when I write them, the first 300 words are, if it's whatever it is, however specific, writing an eavesdropping scene, or I want to hire an editor. Like, you start out with that. You've got a book, you've got a manuscript, you don't know how good it is, you have goals, right? Like, you put them in that experience of, and it can feel a little icky. Like, you're kind of capitalizing on someone's uncertainty, because that's what that point is. Like, they're uncertain. What am I going to do with this book? But you also have the solution of like, you need to rewrite the book, and here are ways you can do that. And it just, it works. It does not work to be, you see a lot of stuff out there, that people that write in a very confrontational style or present in a very confrontational style. I don't think it's as effective as just good nonfiction technique of, I'm with you. I know your problem. I'm with you. I can help.
Do you think it is more effective to write in second person? Like, you've written a book. What are you going to do with it now? This is the next step you should take, using that you voice. Or is it better to like provide case studies, so you're third person talking, I guess, or a combination of both?
I use a combination of both. I mean, it's
Yeah.
predominantly in a blog. It's like, it's sort of an IU thing. Like, here's where you're at. Here's where you are. Here's where a lot of writers are. I do a lot of that. Here you have a book, or you have a problem. Here are other people. There are a lot of other people who have a similar problem. It looks like this sometimes it looks like that. Trying to give that person the feeling of like, you're not the only person with this problem. There is a community, and that community has solved this problem. I then will shift once I get into the problem solving part of whatever I'm writing. I will get a little more like case study. I'll be a little more like, kind of a drier example set of things. Or I will use, sometimes if I'm just using my experience as that hook, I will talk about like, well, here's what I do. Here's what I did. I just wrote a blog for my site, oddly, about how to give and receive writers group feedback. That was on my list, coincidentally, the same week that we did the podcast. And it was a lot of that. Like, you have a book, you need some help getting it where it needs to go. Here's what I've done. And I just kind of got personal about it and just said,
did you link to the episode?
Not
in
well,
the blog post?
I haven't published it yet.
Okay.
So I'm site hasn't launched. Let's make sure we're there in a month, but I will for sure. I will. So yeah, like, I just think it's knowing there's certain topics that are softer. And so you have to be a little more like there's no definitive how to give feedback. Like, so I get to give it as like, here's my example. Here's how I do it. Here's what worked for me. So, but there's other things that are more, you have to be a little straighter. You have to be more instructive. So I think you choose the voice by how you're solving the problem. Right.
Also, I think that is like author voice too. If you are
Yeah.
pull no punches kind of writing coach, then you're going to talk in a certain way. And I also think that the intro, where you're putting that person, in the ordinary world so that they recognize themselves, that piece can be more or less developed based on how long the writing project is.
Right. Right. That's
So,
true.
I mean, that makes sense, I guess, anyways. Like if it's a blog post, then you're only going to have, 100 words maybe to like, okay, here's where you
Right.
are. Let me get you to the answer. And
Well,
that's, I think, based on the reader's expectations. If I am going to read a blog post about solving a problem that I have, I know it's going to be a quick bite. It's going to be like
right.
the top 5 ways to market your new ebook, and
Right.
I can scan through even and like read the steps. And if the steps look engaging, like, oh yeah, I've never thought of that, then I'll deep dive and go in and read it. But if it is a book that's 50,000 words on how to stay motivated during, this long form writing project that you have to, or whatever, then there might be a whole
Yeah.
chapter dedicated to like, hey, I totally get where you're at. I felt this way too. Maybe some personal anecdotes, something like
Yeah.
that, so that you can really feel heard and seen as a reader who has a problem.
Right. And something you keep saying, and I think it's key to all of it. Like you have your writing voice. This is who you are. Like my style is not confrontational. My style is a little more conversational. But the way I came to that voice is through just really knowing who my reader was. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was, we talked about this offline, but the I think the transformation in my website from not functional. I mean, I don't want to say it was dysfunctional, but it wasn't producing it wasn't producing.
Mm-hmm.
The change for me really came when, and I had a really good friend say this, like, you need to know who your reader is. Picture your ideal customer, write to them. And that really formed the voice of what I was doing, because I saw my ideal customer. I saw the person that was coming to my site, and that person they have a desire to get something done, whether they've started or not. They're informed. They're willing to do this. Like, this sounds kind of like strict, but like they're willing to do this the right way. Like they're willing to take instruction. That's a big thing. And so I was writing to that, eager to be informed, eager to get done, um, enthusiastic person. And that changed everything. Just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that voice, knowing that reader informed the voice, created the style, and here we are.
Good advice. I've been thinking about before you think about your idea. This is totally off topic, guys. Before you read, or before you can decide what your ideal customer is, or ideal reader, or whatever, I think you have to be clear about what you yourself provide
Oh
in your
yeah.
services.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are very clear, and then something happens and they have to pivot their business model, or maybe something's just not working, sustainably in their business model. So they need to shift and try a new thing.
Right.
And, spending time with yourself and trying to figure out what that is vital to
Yes.
being able to write to that ideal customer, so that you can, draw in clients and attract readers.
110%. Right. Because like in our world, if you go look at 10 people that provide coaching or editing or any sort of writer service, writing authority voices vary from Joanna Penn, who's very, sort of soft and like engaging and kind of giggly. And, she's just a
She's
very warm,
also very like, I got your
informative.
information and here it
Right.
is.
Right. Right. But she comes across very much like, just like someone who feels very nurturing. But then there's others, and I'm not going to name them because it maybe seem a little bit derogatory, but like who just kind of hit you with like facts, like, oh, right,
Mhm.
here's how you're going to amp this up, power this up. That sort of
It's
like,
not going to work unless you do it this way.
right. Yeah. And like that, like that's not, they're providing the same information. They've, I think, just probably identified who they are in relation to that ideal customer reader, and and sort of molded. And this is where kind of being a nonfiction writer, I think, can maybe feel a little, I don't know, you insert your word, but it feels a little bit like you're conform. I guess it feels like you're conforming, but because you kind of have to, like you have to sort of create something that you can give people consistently, um, and be that all the time in that voice. I think that consistency, especially if you're going to do this over time, like you can't
Okay.
have
I
your
didn't
like,
like the word conforming, but I like
yeah,
what
it's a
you're
bad
saying
word.
now. Because
You
you're
have to
not,
be consistent.
you have to be consistent.
You have to cultivate something and be willing to stick with it. Otherwise, it's gonna be a very uneven.
Well, that's
Because
branding.
right, well, I think nonfiction writers almost more than fiction writers have to have that
Brand.
branding.
Yeah. And that
Otherwise,
comes from knowing who you are and leaning into it. I really like that Sacha Black,
yeah,
quote, like lean into you, do you.
right, yeah,
And then the right people are going to show up. Your ideal
yes,
customers will show up if you just be you.
yeah,
And that is something that I continually have to remind myself, because I have that old baggage that doesn't serve me anymore. It isn't even a core belief of mine anymore. I mean, it is
right,
apparently a core belief because I keep coming up with it, but it's
right,
one that no longer serves me, and logically I don't want it anymore. And that's that, like, if you don't know what you're talking about, then you can't be professional. And, that imposter syndrome, that fear
uh,
that I don't really know what I'm talking about, even though I know I do.
right, right.
And somehow I have gotten mixed up between perfectionism and professionalism. Like they've become intertwined in my brain.
That
And
is
I'm
so well
really trying
put.
to disentangle that. And that's hard. But yeah,
Hey,
lean into you. The
right.
more you are you, the more you're going to attract the clients that will just help you thrive as an entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah. I mean, cheerleaders and drill sergeants are kind of they're very similar, but it's a similar message. It's just
Mhm.
delivered differently. And if that's why I guess I meant like, you have to conform was the worst word, but you have to be consistent. If you're going to choose that cheerleader, nurturing cheerleader type, that's who you are. Be comfortable with it, because the transition, if you jump over to that drill sergeant tone, that reader is gonna like, whoa, like this isn't right. And also, you're in business, so you want sell through. You want people. You don't want people to come to you once. You want people to come to you all the time. And so, if they don't feel like you're consistent, they don't feel like you're going to get a consistent product from you. So think of it
Yeah.
that way.
And segue into the closing comments, that solution at the end of the book, like you just said, if you want sell through, if you want someone to hire you to be a ghostwriter or whatever after reading your
Right.
book, you have to clearly define the solution. Sometimes I read nonfiction books and, they spend the entire time like trying to, keep you in this ordinary world, like trying to convince you that this is a problem. And that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for the
Right.
solution. Yes, I guess that's where I get the preaching to the choir feeling, like, okay,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, 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 get to the end. I want to know what to do about this. And sometimes I read nonfiction books and I get to the end and they really haven't given me any clear, like they spend the whole book, stating the problem,
Right.
giving
Right. There's no
examples of
conversion.
people, yeah. And yeah. So having that solution at the end with specific actionable steps, that's what resonates with me as a reader of nonfiction.
As well it should, right? Yeah, because I think that if you don't convert them either to a sale or just pay off that promise that you made in the beginning, then that's not a successful. And again, that comes down to knowing who your reader is. You have to know the solution they're looking for too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not every, like, there's not a problem I can think of off the top of my head that has one simple, easy solution to it. You're offering people a menu of solutions, usually, right? Like, and, or at least like, here's the menu of solutions. Here's the one that I'm most fond of, or I endorse. You have to know your reader, which one they want, like you.
And maybe the book isn't, if it's not a how-to book, then it's not going to have clear actionable steps. Maybe it's just a philosophy of like, hey, have you ever thought of living life with this philosophy, and
Right.
so it will have a different kind of solution at the end, but
Right.
but there still will be a conclusion that will leave the readers feeling satisfied.
Right. Right.
That's the hope anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. With hope, they're no longer cornered. They're moving forward.
And
I think that's,
understood. Yeah.
yeah.
Feeling
Yeah.
understood.
Understood.
All right. Well, thanks for talking with me about this topic. I think
It was
it's
my pleasure.
yeah, I think it's interesting, and sometimes it seems kind of like common sense, but it's good to revisit common sense stuff too and make sure that we're continuing to do the work that we set out to do.
Right. I
So,
think that's part of the writer trap too, right? We talked about this offline, is that it's you get so down in the weeds, you sometimes forget the obvious. And I think especially on something like it, just what we're talking about is very simple, and I think those are the easiest things to lose, right?
yes,
I'm writing to
absolutely.
a person. This is what that person needs, and here's what I believe they should do. Like there's a lot of weeds between here and there, so a lot of them.
So next week, we are going to be talking about marketing again, but this time marketing with other authors
Oh,
and
fun.
different ways to do that. Newsletter swaps, or all of
Potentially
the
fun.
potentially fun, all
This
of
is
the
fun.
other ways to
This is
yeah. Okay.
this is fun. This is fun with an asterisk.
And we'll get into that next
Yeah, we
week.
will.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Happy writing. See you next week.
Take care, everyone.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.